the thing that fueled me on squats was like the fear of dying. I mean, it was literally
such
a fear
fun
of dying
thing to say, yeah.
every week. So it was like, you better get this. For me, I never got like adrenaline or excitement over deadlifts because like if something goes wrong, I can drop it.
Welcome to the Shaw Strength Podcast. I am joined today by Mr. Blaine Sumner. And Blaine, better known maybe as the Vanilla Gorilla, right?
Yep.
So like this crazy guy that I have seen videos of, like all these insane lifts, man, and you're walking in here and you seem so calm and collected and just like not in that zone, right? And I think there's a lot we're going to discover about the switch that you have, the switch that you flipped, but I'm excited to learn more about you, man. This is great to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I'm pumped.
Yeah, it's gonna be good, man. So let's go through real quick, just for people that aren't super familiar with your story and kind of your background and where you came from and what makes you tick. What was growing up like for you?
Pretty simple, pretty basic. Grew up in Colorado, played a couple different sports, football, wrestling, lacrosse, all through high school.
Okay.
Always loved lifting. Got into lifting for the football, but loved the lifting part of it. Went to college down the street, Colorado School of Mines. Studied there, played football, had fun, had a good career. Tried to chase the NFL thing temporarily, didn't quite work out for me. Had always loved lifting heavy, so took a natural transition right into powerlifting, and that was around 2010. And I guess the rest of the powerlifting stuff is known. Yeah,
man. Yeah, no. So growing up with sports, I feel like you just said so much right there, and we're going to unpack a little bit of that. But so when you were younger, were you drawn to sports? Was that something that was like, hey, I want to do this? Or it was, growing up here in Colorado, what was the hometown experience? The reason I'm asking that is, like, for me, I grew up here in Colorado too, just in Fort Lupton, which is a small town, but the football team was not very good, and the basketball team was what the whole town kind of focused on, right? Like that was kind of the sport. And so as a kid, I always loved going to the basketball games. I was like, hey, I want to play basketball when I get older. Not that I didn't go to the football games or whatever, but it was just where my mind kind of went. So with you, did you gravitate more toward the football, or did you really love all sports?
I loved all sports, but football and wrestling were hands down my favorite, and I'd say what formed me more than anything.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, did you like the competitiveness? Because obviously football being a team sport, and not that wrestling isn't, but wrestling is very much a one-on-one, like you're either going to win or lose, going against another guy. And I mean, that can scare some people for sure. But like, if you like the competition and that aspect of competing, like what drew you into that? What was the most fun about both of those?
For sure, the competitiveness, football, the camaraderie with your friends, and then the ability to hit people. Hitting was the most fun.
Not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing. Yeah.
And then with wrestling, just how it makes you grow as a human, as a person. The difficulty of it, the challenges. I mean, at that age, getting in a singlet in front of your whole high school wrestling, just makes you grow as a person, and always feels good to go through a challenge and come out on the other side victorious.
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. I mean, it will make you grow. That's for sure. I mean, I think that for example, we have two boys, and we put them into wrestling, and I think having them in that, whether they'll continue or not, I don't know, but I think that it's really good to kind of get outside of your comfort zone, especially when you're younger, right? Because now, and we can get into this a little bit more, but I feel like things have gotten potentially a little bit softer. And it's not so much like, hey, the competitive, I'm going to go in football and hit somebody, or wrestling, like I'm just in this combative state, with somebody else, where it's kind of a sink or swim situation, right?
Yeah. I loved every bit of it. And I'm a competitive person, but I got get so nervous before every game, every meet. Even if I was wrestling a kid that I knew I was going to, stick in 10 seconds, I get so nervous to the point of nearly having to throw up. And that carried all through my lifting career too. But that switch you're talking about, everything I ever competed in, when the event starts, that switch, that nerves goes to pure adrenaline. And that's that feeling of that switch and just an absolute adrenaline rush whenever you're on the field or the mat or the platform. That's what fueled me. That's what I live for.
Oh, it makes you feel alive, right? It's such a good thing. So what age did you actually start lifting? Do you remember?
Actually, I wasn't good being big and strong for a very long time, but both my parents got me into it. My mom taught PE at random high school for like 30 years. And my dad competed in powerlifting before I was born. So when I was probably in middle school, I got interested in, how to get bigger and stronger. So they kind of showed me some lifts like the squat and power clean in our garage with the broomstick. So
amazing.
I'd say they were the first ones to kind of get me into it.
Okay.
And then at high school, the football weight room, was kind of my, I guess, first exposure to weights. And then I really started to learn what I was doing and get better. When I was a senior in high school, my dad knew I wanted to get more serious, get bigger and stronger for college football. Looked into places where it would help me, and found a gym in Aurora, Rocky Mountain Lifting Club. I think you actually, Dan and Jen.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's where I got my exposure to powerlifting, was there.
Okay. So, I mean, is it something when you got in the weight room, because it sounds like you had some exposure when you were younger, and I'm assuming you were fascinated by strength or, building that. And then as you got into sports, was there a point in getting into sports and becoming more serious with wrestling and football where you kind of felt like, hey, I need to train to get better with that or to be stronger, or was your mindset already like, hey, in middle school, I'm doing, normal stuff, kind of like push-ups and sit-ups and learning, some of the movements?
It bit me in high school. And,
okay.
And my motivation for it was to become a better athlete. And the thing that motivated me was as a freshman in high school, I was the second weakest kid on our team. Like when we did our testing. So I was always very tall, very skinny, not strong. And it just gave me this insane hunger when people would be bigger and stronger than me. Like I want that. I want to be stronger than him. I want to be bigger than him. And that led me to want to become bigger and stronger, to be a better athlete and continue to fuel me.
Yeah, 100%. So with that being said, okay, you're second weakest as a freshman, right? What, and the reason I'm asking some of this is, for me, I kind of got into it, in that, 14, 15, like around that age, right? So like mainly sophomore, junior year is really where I was like, hey, I need to get after this and train. And it's not that I wasn't confident, but I know for me, once I started lifting and then I started having, the positive effects of training. So you're, stronger, for me, I definitely got leaner and, just felt better in my own skin. So it had a lot of positive effects. Obviously the main focus was to get better with sports, same thing. So you're saying the same thing that I would say, but as you got into that after your freshman year, what was the effect like on you? I mean, were you a very outgoing kid, or did you kind of stay to yourself, or how was that like for you?
I would say I was outgoing. I was probably average. I don't think the lifting and getting bigger and stronger really changed my personality.
Got it.
I always focused on sports, tried to do good in school, make my parents proud, and I didn't really change me as a person, I don't feel like.
No, that's as you got stronger, how soon did you climb out of that like second weakest spot?
It took a long time. It wasn't until I was towards the end of my high school career, being a senior, where I was probably finally like the strongest kid on our team. And I went to a small school, so that's not even saying much. But it took me a long time to get to the point where I felt like I was a big, strong athlete.
Did the lifting in general come pretty naturally to you? Or, I mean, like when you got in, because I would say for myself, it was something where I'd worked on a farm growing up and, throwing hay bales and that type of thing. So I had kind of a natural strength. And then when I got in the weight room, I had to learn how to move the bar, right? But I feel like it came pretty naturally to me. It was something that like, okay, once I got the lifts down, then I was able to definitely accelerate the weight that I could lift. For you, as you got in there, was that pretty fast progression, or was it like, hey, I'm building this? Like, did it take a good amount of time? It sounds like maybe it did.
Yeah. I don't feel like I was, naturally acclimated to being big and strong. Like I didn't go in with like freaky strong at some lift or really good at something. Felt like it took me a very long time to kind of get my feet under me, and kind of
Interesting.
felt like Bambi for quite a few years.
Yeah,
squatting.
man. No, but I'm assuming you were having fun with it though.
Yeah. I absolutely loved it.
And was it the fact that it was an individual thing, or were you lifting a lot with the guys on your team?
We lifted as a team, but I did a lot on my own by myself.
Okay. So self-motivated.
Yeah.
Right. So when did you start getting recruited then? Like, when did you know that you were going to be able to possibly play football at a college level?
Not until my senior year of football in high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Went to a small school, and the recruiting world was different then.
Indeed.
Couple local schools had interest. Didn't have any big school scholarships or anything like that. Took a few visits to like CSU, University of Wyoming, but settled on School of Mines because they laid out a good career path for you for life after
Absolutely. That. And it sounds like school is pretty important to you.
Yeah.
Right. So that, like, I'm assuming you excelled in high school then.
Yeah. I tried.
Getting in, for people that don't know, getting into the School of Mines is not super easy. Right. So as an athlete, going there is even more difficult. Right. So, it's ironic because they recruited me to play basketball there. And I was like, man, they didn't have anything that I was interested in. For me, it was more, kind of like exercise physiology and that path, more of the, going into strength. Right. And that's definitely not what you would find at the School of Mines. So, definitely it's a different path, man. So like that was more my brother, right? Like he was more the math and he became an engineer and all that, but it was more his path and not so much for me. So I was like, but definitely if you go there and you can get through, you're going to have definitely a good career path for sure. Yeah. So it sounds like they laid that out for you.
Yeah. I didn't even know what engineering was when I committed to play football there. I just,
that's crazy.
So
you visited and you just liked the school, or was it the professors, or
no?
What drew you there?
Honestly, I was a senior in high school, and they, on your recruiting trip, they pitch you on the thing they pitched the football recruits on was every single football player that makes it through here and graduates and stays on the football team, they have 100% job placement after graduation, and
huge.
The starting salary is $60,000.
Sure.
So as a high school senior, you hear that and like, man, I know I can suck up and make it through school and make it through football. And it seems like a good life after that. It's a scary time in your life where you don't know what you want to do, and the real world's about to hit you. So
yes, it's a lot of uncertainty, right? Yeah. Like you just don't know. And it's such an interesting thing. So you were interested in going into engineering? Is that kind of what, or you weren't sure?
I wasn't sure. And
okay.
Another draw too was I felt like I could go there and probably play, right away or soon.
Yep.
Instead of going to a bigger school, it's sexier to just go CSU or somewhere bigger. And,
but,
maybe you sit on the bench for a couple years.
100%.
Yeah, I knew it, smaller pond, but enjoyed the opportunity to play more.
What position did you play?
So in high school, I was a linebacker.
Okay.
Tall and skinny all through. By the time I was a senior, I was pretty big, like 6'2", 250 when I graduated. Went to Mines and moved to defensive line. So all through college, I played nose tackle and then did some short yardage fullback, which was real fun.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
And then short snapping.
Okay. Did you like that change? Like moving to college? I mean, were you a big fan of being in a linebacker position because you have a little bit more freedom, there to make plays, and a lot of the defense would run through you, right?
Yeah,
as a linebacker. So
good question. I got a funny answer too for it because I loved middle linebacker. My dad groomed me on the cool football players. So Dick Buckus was my hero.
Oh yeah.
So I loved, and so being middle linebacker and hitting people and running around is what I wanted to do. When I went to Mines, they said they were going to make me a defensive lineman. And my first reaction to that was, I don't want to get too big. You got to be big to be defensive lineman. I don't want to put on weight and shoot few years later, I'm, over 300. And
Oh yeah. Yeah.
so, enjoyed it. So.
Well, at that point, you probably thought 250 is pretty big.
Yeah.
Right? Especially
exactly.
at that age, you would for sure.
Yeah.
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 That's funny. It's such an interesting path, man. Like as you go down it, and I'm sure, walking in there, where was your relative strength level compared to the guys that you were playing against in college?
By the time I graduated high school, I had gotten real big and strong, and I was probably about the strongest kid at Mines. Going
That's
into
awesome.
the freshman, and then certainly by the time I graduated, everyone I played against, I was strong.
Do you remember what kind of numbers you were lifting?
Yeah. If you keep asking me these questions, my CTE is going to start coming in. I don't have the best memories, but
dude, it's fine. Yeah.
I love power clean, and so
okay. Which is a big lift for football,
Yeah.
right? Like that's one of the major lifts they would look at for sure.
Yep. So as a freshman at Mines, I power cleaned 425.
Wow. Okay.
I think I went in squatting 600, tad over 600.
Nice.
My bench was slow to develop. I mean, as a football player, it was good, but I was maybe 420, 425 or something as a freshman. And
okay.
Deadlift was not really ever in my repertoire. I always did power cleans instead.
Sure. Well, especially as a football player, that's what you would naturally go to most of the time, right?
Yep, exactly.
Did they even have you deadlift?
No.
Not. It was always cleans.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I know there's stuff that's been out there about deadlifting and whether it's beneficial or not, especially for a football player, and I guess we could go down that path. What's your take on it?
Yeah, certainly. That's a deep question. I would think to not do it. I think like a trap bar deadlift would be a lot better. Mm-hmm. Maybe deadlifting off blocks, but I think like a conventional deadlift off the floor for someone that's just trying to be an athlete is too high risk to push it real hard.
It's a tough one, right? Because the getting your technique dialed in and lifting correctly, right? Like executing that lift correctly, especially in a college weight room where you've got a lot of athletes that you're trying to get through quickly. It's one of those things that if somebody is not executing it properly, it can be a risk, right?
Yep.
And then it's risk reward, because at the end of the day, your deadlift number doesn't necessarily say like you're going to be a better football player on the field, right? So you want lifts that are going to translate over to the field, and that's where it comes in, right? So like I would agree with you on like a trap bar deadlift, like generating that type of power, but also you could execute it a lot safer, right? And the carryover potentially from a trap bar deadlift would be there, right? Like, and I think that's a fascinating thing though.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think even power clean is probably the catch. I don't think if I was in charge of a high school sports team would probably have them do that. I think like a high pull is probably as good as you can get.
It's so interesting you say that, because my biggest goal at that age going through college is I wanted to be a strength coach. So that was the path that I wanted to follow, because I was like, hey, this weightlifting and everything I've done there is what opened the door for me to play in college. And I just loved it, right? And being able to help people with it, especially athletes that were motivated, it seemed like such a good thing to go into. So when I got an opportunity to first intern and then be a graduate assistant at Arizona State, and Joe Ken was there, and that was his big thing, is like, hey, we're not going to catch the cleans, right? Because there's too much injury risk. These guys aren't trying to be Olympic lifters.
Yep.
We're trying to get them to do the full triple extension. But catching, like if I'm going to have a guy get injured catching a clean, why?
Yeah.
Why are we going to do that?
Exactly.
And I remember there was this big debate at that time on whether you should catch a clean or not. And in the weight room, are you getting carryover there or not? You know? So, but you caught that 425 as a freshman.
Yep.
So you would catch that.
Yep.
That's wild, man. People that don't understand that's an insane, so you're 18, 19 years old doing that. Like that's phenomenal, like lifting for sure. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. I enjoyed that lift.
Yeah. Wait, I can tell by the way you're smiling, man. You liked it, which is good, man. And I think that the carryover was there. So obviously you had the power to be a defensive lineman, right? So, is that something, did you start to put more weight on, or were they pushing you? I guess maybe that's a better question. Were they pushing you to put weight on?
No, really didn't push me to put weight on, because at that level, Division II, like 275 is the right size defensive tackle, but that wasn't good enough for me. So I took it upon myself. I was like, I can be better, more dominant if I get bigger and get stronger. So it just continued to snowball. That's
interesting. Now, when you were putting weight on, was there a certain amount that was like, hey, you were setting a goal to get to a certain amount of weight? Or, I mean, was it first, walking in, because you were around 250 as a freshman?
Uh-huh.
Was it, hey, I'm going to get to 275, or was 300 like in the back of your head?
Funny question. I didn't have a number in the back of my head.
Okay.
And, don't mean to skip ahead, but like when I think back to my biggest squats and benches I've ever done, it was the same thing. Like I want to squat this weight or bench this weight. It was just, I want to bench more or squat more. And same with that. I want to get bigger. Just
open-ended.
Yeah.
That's a good way to go though, man, because it I know that, a lot of people fixate on those things, right? And then it kind of, you could argue if you fixate on a certain number that it limits where you can go or what the top end is, right? Like, and I'm fascinated to definitely hear more about the lifting. So you're working through college. I'm assuming you're still lifting pretty hard through college and developing this love. Like how did your relationship with the game of football go through college?
Man, I loved it.
Loved it.
Loved playing with my teammates. It was fun. It was Division II, Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference. Not nothing big or great or sexy, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, man.
And you sure took pride in it. Like even winning a conference championship in that conference at that time meant the world to you.
100%. I mean, that's something. And again, how was your balance with the school, right? Because that's not easy.
Yeah, for sure the hardest 4 or 5 years of my life. Going, playing football there, going to school there. It's you don't have much time for anything outside of that.
Nope.
Whatsoever.
Yeah, that's your life. I don't think a lot of people sometimes realize how hard it is to be a college athlete, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's people that go to college and okay, yeah, you go to class and do whatever, work, homework, studying that you need to do. But then when you're a college athlete, now you've got team practice. A lot of times you'll have an individual practice. You've got, time in the weight room mixed in with all of your classes plus all your work. And a lot of times, I don't know did you guys do study table? Like where you had mandatory study table as a team?
If your GPA wasn't high enough.
Okay. So sometimes we would have to go like just as a basketball team, but obviously basketball team's smaller than a, football team. So, but we had to go do that. Like that was study table. And so it's like your day is consumed because a lot of times the individual practice was in the morning before you went to class, right? So like you're all day working, right? So you have no time. You have no time to just relax or whatever. And then if you're not on top of it, you're not ready for your next test or not ready for whatever you've got going. And that's a challenge, man. Yeah. It really is. Like a lot of people don't realize how hard that is.
Yeah. And it's not like high school. I mean, once you get behind, there's no making it up.
Nope. Yeah, you're behind.
Yeah.
So did you do pretty well with school?
Yeah, I didn't do great, but I didn't do bad. I mid 3 point something GPA.
Nice.
And
yeah. Well, I mean, and at mines that's not bad, man, for sure. Right? I feel like you're downplaying it a little bit, but I mean to get through that. So what did you major in? What was your what did you end up going into, or what was you most interested in?
Got my bachelor's in petroleum engineering, and then also at mines did my master's in engineering and technology management.
Nice. And is that what you're in today?
I'm in the oil field still today. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So it ended up being, I mean, when you got out, was that promise fulfilled? Like you were right into a job and making good money and.
Yep. And they set you up good with internships. They got a career day there. So I had 3 summer internships with actually the same company that I work for now and have been with for like 13 years.
That's awesome, man.
That's
awesome.
Out.
So what years were you there?
So I graduated high school in 2006.
Okay.
Went straight into mines, graduated 2010 at mines.
Nice. So 4 years you got all that done.
I got my bachelor's in 4, and then
okay.
I had started on my master's, went into the workforce, and then kind of finished my master's a few years after being in the workforce.
Nice. That's awesome, man. So when did you? I'm assuming with football, and I know you kind of mentioned at the start of this that you tried some of the NFL stuff. Like how was that path, or like what opportunities did you potentially get with that coming out?
Yeah, so the at mines, me and my 2 closest friends were the defensive line. We ran a 3-man front. I was the nose guard. Both of them were DNs, and all 3 of us had NFL looks, had All-American honors, had a really good defensive front. One of our defensive ends, Mark Scheichel, he ended up getting his shot. He went with the Carolina Panthers.
Nice.
It was 2010, so it was the year of the NFL lockout. I had letters from teams. I had a big-time agent. Went to the Senior Bowl to try and work my ends in there. Closest I got was with the Redskins. I had a phone call. A flight was supposed to be coming the next morning. After I got that call, a few hours later came. They said, "Sorry, our roster's filled." So I don't know what went on behind the scenes or
sure.
Didn't want to go the route of the CFL or the arena because your window is so short. If you don't get in, then you got a whole crop of guys coming in the next year. There's a whole crop of guys the year ahead of you that are still trying to get in. So I decided that I still had my hopes up for a few months after the draft that the phone call was going to come one day, and but decided to move on with pursuing powerlifting in my career.
That's fair, man. I mean, it's like you said, that it's an interesting thing, when you get done, right? And like there's a lot, because it's I think you always look at it as high school. There's only so many high school players that get to play in college, right? And then from there, the pool gets whittled down quite a bit,
yep.
Right? And then if you excel in college, how many get to take that next step? And then trying to find that spot, and it's all of these different things, and if that door opens, it's wonderful. And then, like you said, how long is that window open? And if you don't get in, what's the right choice? And I'm sure you had to do some internal thinking for yourself, like what's my path and where am I going to go, and if it doesn't come, what am I going to do? So when you finished up playing football, did you have aspiration? I'm sure you did, of going into powerlifting and continuing with that.
Yeah, because when I was in college, all throughout mines, once a week I would go to Rocky Mountain Lifting Club. My dad would come pick me up. It was awesome. I had great memories of it. My dad would come pick me up. So NCAA mandated Mondays off. So my dad would come pick me up, drive me an hour to Aurora.
Okay.
Squat at Rocky Mountain Lifting Club there. Did that pretty much through all of mines. And so I was very exposed to powerlifting through those years. I competed in, 2 like kind of local meets.
All right.
In the summer.
Okay.
Without real training. So I was always exposed and knew about powerlifting and followed the sport. And so as the football was dwindling, there wasn't really a decision in my head like, hey, I want to do powerlifting full time now. I knew I was going to continue lifting heavy, and I was kind of exposed to the sport, so started doing more competitions at that point.
So when you were going during college, did like your coaches know you were going to lift there on Mondays?
It actually caused a lot of drama, and
I bet it did. Yeah,
kind of bothered me. So no, they didn't know.
Okay.
And it bugged me because like the kids that would do track in the off season, they got like a pat on the back. Good for these guys going out and doing more. And I was like, man, I'm getting bigger and stronger. It's not an NCAA sport, but I thought I was making myself a better football player by pursuing this.
Yeah.
And I did 2 meets in the summer, one after my junior and one after my senior year, that I got in trouble with the coaches because I wasn't supposed to be competing outside of that.
Well, I can see it from both sides, right? Like you're lifting and training, but it's like once you start competing, maybe that's a gray area.
Yeah.
Because if you get hurt, right, like you're an asset to the team. Yep. So if you get hurt, now it's like, well, hey, you probably shouldn't have been doing that. But look, it sounds like you didn't get hurt.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah. So you're getting better. So once you coming out of college, like what was that like? Because now I'm assuming you're training more full time for powerlifting. Were you still in Colorado then?
So about as soon as I graduated, my job took me to Gillette, Wyoming.
Okay.
I spent a year there as part of a rotation training, and then moved to Oklahoma City, where I spent about 7 years.
Okay.
And then once I was in Wyoming, I was like, man, I want to do whatever I can to live here. I love it.
So you loved it in Wyoming. That's great,
loved
man.
it. And so when I saw an opportunity to move back up, and actually got married while I was in Oklahoma City to my wife, who was living in Gillette.
Awesome.
So once I had the opportunity to move back to Wyoming, with the same company, I jumped on that.
Yeah, that's great.
But I do remember, kind of feeling like the chapter on football was closed. It was a weird feeling to me because I always trained very heavy and very seriously, but the goal was always to be a better football player. But I remember my first few sessions going back to Rocky Mountain Lifting Club thinking like, am I still going to be motivated? Like when I go into squat, like, is that fire still going to be there? Cause I have a different reason now, but yeah, it never waned, and I just continued to do what I'd always been doing.
That's well, I mean, it's I think you always have to assess your why, right? Like, why are you doing it? And then, if you have that internal fire, that's where it's always got to come from anyway, right? Like you can't, if it was for the football, and truth be told, and I'm sure you probably saw this, a lot of your teammates probably lifted pretty hard through college and they're done with football, then they don't touch a weight again, or they walk away from it, right? So it's, once that motivating factor is gone, they're not wanting to push just to be stronger, and I think that's where you're really into it, right? You have that, like, you're just pushing yourself for no other reason but just to push yourself to find out what you can do.
Yeah.
And I think when you're motivated like that, it's a different place than a lot of people can get to.
Without a doubt.
So you're into it. So now, when did your next meet come after college? Like, how quickly did you start to get into that? And, was it when you were in Wyoming, or was it when you were in Oklahoma?
I think I still did one, I think shortly after I graduated. But I guess I remember my first kind of big meet after the football chapter had closed as being the USAPL Raw Nationals in, God, I don't even remember the year now. It was in Pennsylvania. But my memory from that was WWE Big E. Do you know the Big E?
I think I remember vaguely. Yeah.
So he competed at that meet.
Oh, fun.
I remember like the weigh-ins, like seeing this dude with traps that were up to the top of his head and just built like a Greek god. And so I competed against him, and we actually tied on total, and I lost on body weight. But that was my first memory of a meet after the football chapter closed. Okay.
So, I mean, that's a big one, right? Like, you're traveling to that, and
yeah.
I mean, so at that point you were pretty serious with going there. So was that type of thing, right? You tied and then lost on body weight. Like, were moments like that, I would assume they're motivating to you.
Yeah.
Like, to come back and to win, right? Like, that's where you were trying to go.
Yep. It kind of what I said that motivated me at first in the high school weight room was like just seeing somebody, whether it was in person at a meet or online, just someone bigger or stronger than you. It's like, that was all I needed to just
make it happen.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So when you got to Wyoming and you were staying there, what was the training like your setup? Because I think that at least some of the videos I've seen, it seems like you've had your own setup. It wasn't necessarily at a gym you were going to, or at that point were you going to a gym?
So when I moved up to Wyoming the first time, I was kind of like you. I'd brought my own equipment into like a somewhat commercial gym.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah. So did that route. When I was in Oklahoma City, there was a small group of guys that took training pretty seriously. One of the guys owned a gym. It wasn't a commercial place, but so it was easy for me to move my stuff in there and kind of bounced around Oklahoma City for a bit. And then my permanent stint now up to Wyoming, we have our own gym, our own place, own equipment.
That's awesome. Is that on your property then?
It's not on the adjacent property to our house, but it's a shop in town, just an industrial.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, and that's the gym setup.
Yep.
And is that where you did a lot of your training, like when you were competing seriously?
Yeah. So most of the videos that the people have seen, like training by myself, the squats and stuff are done in that warehouse gym in Wyoming.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you had a group maybe in Oklahoma that you were training with, and then when you went back to Wyoming, was that pretty much solo then?
There was about 3 guys in Wyoming that helped me, and same group of guys that I trained with my first stint up there: Bill Collins, Derek Lang, Trevor Teppo. So my first stint up there, they helped me. When I had gone, one of the guys started his own gym, which is awesome. It's super outfitted. And he's been focusing more on that. And I could have gone there and trained when I went back to Wyoming, but I have to have my music and my atmosphere and my environment and my ability to unleash what I need to in training. So and they all work in the coal mines, and so they have crazy shifts. Like, I don't even understand the shifts, like the days and the hours. So hard to get anyone to come help me. So it usually ended up being my wife. But when things would align, one of them would normally be able to come help me.
So it just was a lot based on schedule.
Yeah.
Like trying to and that's, I mean, when you're going after it, I mean, I definitely dealt with that as well, right? Like it's nice. I think if I had my choice, I would prefer to always have somebody there, at least one other, person training. It didn't really matter their strength level too much. It was more the energy that they could bring.
Yeah.
So when you're training by yourself, it's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes you have to dig to a different place, especially with some of the lifts that you're doing, right? Like it's not easy. People don't realize loading up a bar with that much weight it's not simple and easy to do. It's not like you snap your fingers and the weights all go on the bar and it's done.
Yep.
Like there's a lot of work that goes into that, right?
Yeah.
So for you, your progression in powerlifting, and I know you said earlier, like you didn't have numbers in mind that were like necessarily, I'm assuming in each meet you had a different goal that you were working towards though.
Absolutely.
So were there certain like milestone numbers that in your mind were like, hey, I really want to get to this certain weight on this lift?
Yeah. So I'll muddy the waters up here a bit because the powerlifting world's fractured, and you got the raw and the equipped. And
yes,
at the time where I was coming up, they were intermingled for a bit. But I guess the first kind of milestone memory I remember at the time, raw was very new at the time. So this was 2010-ish, 11. 771 was the American record for the raw squat in USA powerlifting. And so that was my first milestone, and I broke that. And then the next one I wanted was 804. Obviously going back in history, they wiped some of the record books just with the fracture of the sport and all that. So I know it was not the first 800 raw squat ever by any stretch. But the modern USAPL raw stuff, it was the first 800 raw, and then IPF, the raw scene started to grow around 2012, and 400 kilos or 881 pound raw squat was like the next milestone that I got. Then eventually 900 after that.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. And it's interesting because the raw powerlifting definitely took off like in a big way, and before that, it really was pretty minimal, right? Like, and I don't think a lot of people realize that now, because I think for whatever reason, the popularity definitely grew, right? Like of it. And it's, and I, to be fair, it's hard for me to even keep up with powerlifting because it's so fractured.
I can't even do it.
That's crazy, man. And you're a guy that was in it like crazy. So it's, you see a different meet happening, and then there's a different federation that's doing it, and they're putting it on. And then, this squat depth is, acceptable in this federation, but this is not over here. And, it's this, unfortunately, it creates this, especially to maybe the public that's watching is like, when is this okay? When is that okay? And, why is this supportive gear allowed and this is not? And, it's unfortunate, man. Like, I mean, what was your favorite? I'm assuming it was just like a single ply, very straightforward was your favorite? What was it? Or was raw? Like, what was your take on that?
I'll give you the long answer. Raw was my favorite because, so at the time I was lifting in college, and shortly after, there was no real like raw.
Okay.
It's, everything, especially on the IPF, which, everyone's got their own opinion, but from how I came up and what I looked at it, like the IPF was the gold standard. It's like recognized by the IOC. They have true standards that are followed. It's got the biggest global footprint. It's like you go to an IPF meet anywhere in the world, and it's like, okay, this looks somewhat like the Olympics.
Yes.
So that's where I started and where I always stayed. So anyways, at that time, the IPF, like raw, wasn't the thing. I think 2012 was the first raw World Cup. So everything was single ply.
Yep.
And so as I started doing higher level meets, raw was the only thing I'd ever done, really. So I loved raw, but I would go to these meets and compete against guys from Europe that would kick my butt in gear in single ply. And I knew, especially at the time, like I could out squat them raw by 200 pounds.
That's wild.
But they were kicking my butt in the gear.
Yeah.
So I loved raw, and I was like, this gear stuff is stupid.
Yeah.
We should all lift raw. jump around here a little bit. I tore both my hip labrums squatting raw, which eventually pushed me into the gear. But I distinctly remember so the year was 2012, and I won the first IPF Raw World Cup. That same year I did the Open Worlds, which are single ply. That's always, for the however many years, that's been like the gold standard of the IPF is the Open Worlds. And I went there and I got my butt kicked by guys that I knew I was a lot stronger than. And that's crazy. Really what started to spur me to like, I'm going to figure this gear out. Like, this is BS that these guys are kicking the crap out of me, but I know I'm stronger than them.
Yep.
And so that is really what, tearing my hip labrums, squatting raw, and then having these guys kick my butt is really what pushed me hard down that path of figuring out the gear.
That makes sense.
And then just the time overlap was kind of unfortunate. So like 2015-ish is when I kind of retired from anything raw because of my hips and did straight into single ply. And sort of around that same time frame, the raw popularity started
to grow
exploding
big time. Yeah, it's interesting. So how long did it take you? Because you're saying like, okay, I'm going to these meets and these guys that are not as strong as me, they put on a single ply suit and they can get a ton out of it, right? Like, I'm assuming there had to be some period of learning that, right? So that you're able to translate your strength in a way that the suit can benefit you majorly.
Yep. It never stopped. The learning curve always had an upward trend to it still. So it even my last equipped squat I ever did, I was still learning more from it. But it probably took me probably close to 3 years before I felt like I was as good as some of the other guys in it.
What was the hardest to learn? Squat, like out of the 3 lifts with the gear, what was the hardest to learn, or maybe they were all a little bit different?
I think the bench was the hardest to learn, but it's what I became the best at. For me, the squat, because of my squat style, like it's vertical shins, push my butt back, which is not real conducive to the suit. The more like Olympic style upright torso, knees forward is more conducive to the suit. So I always struggled a lot in the suit getting to depth. They're real strict in the IPF. So yes. I struggled with my squat style to get depth. So
did you change your squatting style at all?
No, not really.
Not really. So what year? Would you say that you started to like kind of really excel with figuring out the suit? Was it more that 2015 range, or what kind of weight?
I had so that 1,000-pound mark in the gears is always like my goal, because like Brian Siders, he was like the first and only to do that. And so I'd always chase that, but I was plenty strong enough for years and years before I was finally able to do it. And I think it was 2016 was maybe the first time I did
1,000-pound.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can find. We're gonna try to find a clip of.
It was at USAPL Nationals in Killeen, Texas, and actually that may have been 2012. Yeah. So
1,000-pound barrier is huge, man.
Yeah.
So like to squat, I mean, put it, and you're walking it out too, right? So it's not out of a monolift.
Right.
So you pick it up, step back, get set, and dunk 1,000 pounds, right?
Yep.
How was that? And we'll try to find the video, but how was it? Like mentally going into that, how was that?
It was awesome. Like with all my lifts, it was just adrenaline fueled, but, and the first 10, I know you'll understand this, you'll relate to it. The first 10 seconds after it, I did my 1,000-pound, I saw the white lights. The first 10 seconds after was awesome. And then it was like, that's not enough. Like I want to do more. That's not enough.
Isn't it funny, man? It's such a crazy mentality to have that where, 1,000 pounds, it's like this milestone you cross. And I definitely remember that too. More for me with deadlifting, because we would never squat for max in strongman. It was always deadlift for max, and then squat, if we had it, was for reps. So it wasn't ever, that's something that I would say for me, I would be curious what I could have done with a max squat. But again, I would do max effort, 5s, 3s, 2s, whatever in training, but it wasn't ever like something I would push. So here, maybe we have this. So talk us through it, man.
Yeah. So this one was not my first 1,000. I'm trying to think of, man, these European meets all run together in my head.
So this is over in Europe.
Yeah.
Man, look at that. This guy in the front was not impressed. Look at his face. Not impressed. that was like the fakest clapping I've seen.
That was the World Championships in Dubai in 2019, at the end of 2019.
Okay. So this is later on.
Yeah.
Later on. I mean, and how much weight was that?
That was 495 kilos, so just under 1,100 pounds.
1,100 pounds. That's wild, man. And that's just an IPF power bar, right?
Yeah.
That you're squatting on.
Yep. There's a 1,025 solo one.
And this is by yourself.
Yeah.
That's wild, man. Now, didn't you got hurt pretty bad in training?
Yeah.
By yourself. I know I saw what year was that?
2017. It was fall of 2017.
And this is your gym in Wyoming then?
So this one was that was Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is earlier, a little bit earlier on.
Yep.
Okay.
The injury one, I don't think it's on YouTube. I think it's on my Instagram, but it was horrible. It was just my wife and I, in their training. She got to the point where she was wrapping my knees and then helped me get the straps up. And I was getting ready for Worlds, which are in November, and I did 1,025, which at the time was about my opener. I would always kind of train with just trying to make my opener better. Successfully did the squat, and I think everyone's seen like the flimsy IPF squat stands that we use.
Yep.
I did the 1025 squat, did it fine, and as I was putting it back in, the whole rack tipped forward.
Oh man!
And so on those benches,
is this it right
yeah,
here?
This is it.
So this is 1,025.
Yep.
And this is just, I mean, if it's your opener, this is looks comfortable, yeah.
And so my wife's out of the screen there, but so the rack tips over right there.
Oh boy!
And at this point, glad they blurred it out.
Yeah. So did that get caught on the rack?
So
what happened?
It took me a while to figure out what happened, but those racks, so the lower pins are used for the bench press and the upper ones for the squat. Well, I'd use that rack for ever and ever, and those bars are so sharp that where I was racking the bench press, it serrated the edge of that rack. It was sharper than any knife in my kitchen. Oh my gosh! So I think what happened as everything fell forward, my arm sliced on the edge of the power rack there. But so they kind of cut it out of the video. But the bar collapses, the rack collapses, those stands are flipping over, and I did like a systems check. I'm like, okay,
is everything
nothing
okay?
feels broken, and I looked down to take my wrist wraps off, and right there I had
still pretty good scar. Yeah,
guts hanging out of my arm.
So it cut you pretty deep.
Yeah. It cut me down to the tendons, but it didn't cut the tendons.
Oh, thank goodness.
And I saw white stuff, like meat hanging out of my arm. And so I tried to hide it from my wife, and like I took my wraps off, and I just looked at her and I was like, we need to go to the hospital right now. And
sure,
I wrapped a towel around it. And it sounds dramatic now, but at the time I thought I was going to die, because I was like, that's how people die, right? Like you slice your arm there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely don't want to cut, anything that deep, especially too, because normal cut is a different animal. But like when you start seeing white and you're just like, okay, we did some damage for sure. Yeah. It's good you stayed calm and we're like, all right, let's just go. Like let's go get fixed. So with that, no tendon damage though.
So the wife and doctors looked at it. I wouldn't look at it, but they had me move my fingers, and they could, it was cut down to the tendon. So they could see. They saw the tendons wild, moving, but I refused to look at it. But it surprisingly wasn't, a bunch of deep stitches and, wraps for a long time. But I actually competed in Worlds a few weeks after I did that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So at that point, was there ever a thought process of not competing?
So the first couple hours, I was like, I hope I don't lose my arm. I didn't know what was going on.
Of course, yeah.
And I think as soon as I was stitched up, I asked the doctor, like, when can I lift again?
Yep.
And the thing I had to be careful was just obviously applying too much pressure and opening the stitches up. So I had to wear a wrap for quite a while, but the thought never crossed my head that I wasn't going to compete.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, so what, let me talk to me about the mentality of like, especially the squat, right? Because that's no, not that the bench is not, but it's like you have a weight on you, right? And you go in training, you're going down and you're fighting against that, right? Like it's, you know, this mentality, and a lot of people understand that have squatted heavy weight. You need to be committed to that. That type of lift is like, you get under that bar, like it's go time, right?
Yep.
So I think from a mental standpoint, like going into training, it sounds like your wife was there, you know, with you for a lot of these. Where are you going in your head? Like walking into training sessions like that?
Yeah. I can't describe like a specific place I go in my head, but it's just, it's what I've done forever. And it just turns into like an adrenaline fueled do or die. This is the only thing in my life that matters. Nothing else in my life matters. I mean, when I was in those moments, I'm so happy that she's still with me and my training partners and my parents. Cause when I get in the mood to lift heavy, especially the squats, like I become a completely different person. I'm a asshole to be around. I'm impossible to handle. But that's what I required out of myself to mentally get to where I needed to be willing to get under 1,050 pounds almost every single Monday.
Sure.
You know, pretty much by myself.
Yep. It's a fascinating spot, right? Like you go into train and, you know, that type of load, you know, and going where you need to go, right? Like, and it's, a very internal thing, right? And, you know, the people around you, I'm sure you probably, going into it, how much visualization did you use? Like, did you know you had the weight that you were going to hit that week, and now it's like, all right, this is what I've got to do, and you're kind of amping up for it leading in, the days leading in, and then the day of is like, hey, this is a job, right? Like, this is what I'm going to go do. And so, like, for me, I know when I would get ready for a big lift and I knew it was coming up or whatever, like it'd be that process of building up, and then I was so excited in a way that it was coming, and then going in, you of course get some nerves going into even training,
yep. just
to lift that type of weight though.
Yep.
So having that, man, it's crazy, you know, because I've seen a lot of guys that are, you know, in powerlifting, they have a pretty good crew of people around them yelling at them, and, you know, it's like this hype, crazy hype in a way. So to walk in and not necessarily have that, it's crazy, right? Like, so, and I'm sure it's so, like, as I'm talking about it, and even for me, it's like, I understand, but it's like this routine thing that I think a lot of people out there don't really get, right? Like they've never tapped into something like that within themselves. So, you know, talking about it, or like where you have to go, it's such a fascinating thing.
Yeah. I can say without a doubt, no question in my mind, any success that I had squatting was not because of anything physical, no, you know, genetic gift or crazy strength or the perfect training program, or it was all mental. I mean, all of it was mental, because it just started at such a young age. For whatever reason, for me, the squat was like such an adrenaline. This is like a risky thing. Like anytime I got under the bar, it was an adrenaline rush, because every week for a long period of time, I was putting more weight on the bar than I'd ever done. And that's, you know, it's a scary thing, because if something goes wrong on a squat, it's not good. And that's kind of just what I lived off of each and every week. I was able to routine every Monday, get myself to a point where I could almost throw up. I was so nervous just to go into training, which once I started loading the bar, turned into adrenaline, which turned into, it doesn't matter what weight I put on this bar, I know that I can dig deep enough to do it. And you just stack that up,
just
weeks
keep going,
and weeks over years and years.
What's the heaviest squat you ever did in training and then in a meet?
Both of them would be the same, 1,135.
That's crazy, man. And I think we had that. Let's look at it again, because you didn't get to talk through it. 1,135. So that's what, 515 kilos, or roughly?
Yeah, 515.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's a that type of weight, and I'm assuming the walkout was pretty wild.
The walkout?
What weight did the bar start to get a little squirrely, like with the walkout? Like once you got past 1,000, or was it?
For me, it started at 1047, 1,040,
Okay.
475.
So where you really had to focus on the walkout?
Yep. The most challenging thing about, and side note too, this is the squat here. So this is my PR, and it's actually fractured a vertebrae on the walkout of this squat that I didn't know at the time.
Did you feel it when it happened?
Yeah, but I
didn't quite know what it was.
I thought it was the disc at the time.
Okay.
So right there on that stumble.
Yeah, there it was.
And my wife was standing behind me and in the coach's chair.
Up. That's awesome, man. So did that hurt immediately when you were done?
But I'd had a disc issue, a typical disc issue like a lot of lifters have that I'd dealt with forever. And I kind of thought that that's what it was at the time.
Talk to me about the chalk on the face.
Oh, absolutely.
I would love to hear that story. The chalk on the face.
The football days, I always did the eye black.
Yeah.
And a big part of, I competed in the IPF because I thought that was where the most competition was. I did not like how strict it was. I didn't like that they didn't want any show of individualness. And, I always try to do things throughout the years that kind of push the envelope, like kind of started with the bandana, see what I could get away with. But the chalk on the face was kind of the last thing that I was able to do to be like, I want to set myself apart.
Yeah.
This is going to be part of the vanilla gorilla when it's time to squat.
That's awesome.
I knew the higher powers that be in the IPF didn't like it.
So you thrived on that a little bit. I love it. Yep. I love it. What year did you start doing that?
Ah, man. I'm going to call in my CTE here as an excuse again. I don't know. 20.
Was it pretty early or did?
Yeah, I think it was pretty early.
Okay. So what year was this? Like what year did you do that squat?
That 1135 was March of 2020.
Was that the last year when did you call it like done with it?
Yeah, so super long story. So that was March of 2020 at the Arnold. And I injured my back on it. At that same time, the world shut down because of COVID.
Of course.
I kept training through because I had thought it was my normal disc injury. A few months went by, and I started to realize, like, okay, this isn't disc. I'd worked with Stuart McGill since 2017, who's changed my life, added years and years onto my career. So started visiting with him again. He suggested a deep bone scan, which is what revealed the fractured vertebrae. So rehabbed that, which took nearly about 2 years, and was starting to come back through that. Got another scan, the bone had healed. And then as I was coming back, I blew up a new disc in my back, which was much worse than anything I'd done before. Had nerve damage through my leg. My leg didn't work for a while. Yeah, that could be a whole story in itself. But it's March 2020 at the Arnold. That was the last meet that I did.
So you were fighting to come back after that, it sounds like, and then just kind of a string of different things. And that I tell you what, man, you get into nerves. It's a whole different animal. Like people don't realize how bad nerve stuff can be. So are you still dealing with some of that now, or is it?
I can live everyday life pain-free now, and I can train in a way that stimulates me. It doesn't get my juices going. I just have to be, it's the hinged loading of the spine that I have to avoid. So I come up with exercises and workouts where I can still push heavy and get myself happy, but avoid putting myself in a wheelchair.
Is that frustrating for you?
Since 2020, emotionally, it's been the hardest thing I've ever had to go through, because I wasn't ready. I'm not ready. Wasn't ready to hang it up, but my body said otherwise. Yeah,
it's such a tough thing, man. It's like you never, and I've talked to a lot of different lifters, and it's like you try to think of it like you never know when your last big lift is going to come, right? And so it's always how many are in the tank, how many are there. And I think most lifters just assume there's at least another one, right? Like it's always, well, I'll be fine. I'll come back. Maybe this got tweaked or whatever. Like I'll be okay. And then, at some point that, the body, like you said, the body said no, right? Like, and it's such a tough thing, because I'm sure, mentally, and it's not like you're that old, right? Like it's not like, hey, I couldn't still lift and that type of thing, but like that type of extreme load is I mean, how many, just for people to understand, like how many squats do you think you did over 900 pounds?
Hundreds.
How about over 1,000 pounds?
For sure over 100. I again would think a couple hundred.
And then how many over 11?
A handful, 5, 6.
That's crazy. Hundreds over 1,000. I mean, that type of load, because you're hitting that not only in meets, but also in training too. Because if you're going to squat over 1,100, 1,000 pounds is something that's going to be hit in training for sure. Right. So the training loads and volume are something that goes up drastically. Right. So it's, how did you manage that with training? Cause that's going to, it's going to have the wear and tear, right? For sure. But I mean, did you find for yourself, was squatting, for example, since we're talking a lot about that, was that something that was heavy every single week, or did you go like where you had more of a true max effort type of deal and then you gave yourself a little bit more of a break? Like how often could you do a heavy squat?
So I would do the traditional type of thing. I would go 3 weeks heavy, 1 week deload, repeat.
Got it. So there was, and that seemed to carry through your whole career then.
Yep.
Even at the bigger loads.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And towards the end, when I was hitting my biggest numbers, I guess I had matured enough in knowing what I needed to do in the gym to be able to complete what I wanted to on the platform. So it actually towards the end became 1047 was my opener number, 1,047 pounds. And I knew I would pretty much do that every Monday in training. And I knew as long as I could go in and do that and make it look easy, that I was capable of 1,100 plus.
That's why. So week in, week out, that was like, we get to 1,047.
Yep. And
that's crazy.
I wouldn't do, 1,030 or 1,035 or 1,050. I was also big on one of the things that fueled the adrenaline was how something looked on the bar. So that 1047 is an even number of red plates.
I love it.
So that's,
love it.
For me, that was the number. And I knew as long as I could go in and do that each week and just continue trying to make it easier, then I was going to be able to load it up to 1,100 plus.
How did what was your favorite lift of the three?
Squat, hands down.
I was going to say, I would be shocked if you didn't say that, but like you said, like with the shirts, like the bench, what was your least favorite?
Deadlift.
Deadlift was the least favorite.
Yep.
So, and is there a reason why?
I think the reason why is the thing that fueled me on squats was like the fear of dying. I mean, it was literally
such
a fear of
fun
dying
thing to say, yeah.
Every week. So it was like, you better get this. For me, I never got like adrenaline or excitement over deadlifts because like if something goes wrong, I can drop it. And then I think the other piece of it was my training for my whole life for, no great reason. Mondays was squat, Wednesday was bench, Friday was deadlift. And so I think a lot of times I was so fried by the time deadlifts on Friday came around because I'd 1,047 on squat and then go bench 900 something on Wednesday.
Sure.
And then by the time Friday rolled around, I was just kind of fried.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it would be certainly tough to handle that, because your body's basically trying to deal with that load, right? And then coming into a deadlift, like how much more do you have in the tank to go for it? What was the most you benched?
1,003.
1,003. And that was a single ply?
Yep.
Wow. We should look at that. That would be good, man. 1,003. What was it like unracking 1,000 pounds on the bench?
The squats are crazy, but and I had done a lot of squats at 1,100 or around there, but the bench was like a statistical outlier for myself and also relative to what anyone else had done. And that 1,003 bench was like, I literally felt like my forearms, like the bones, like they had like a spongy give.
I would imagine
to them.
Yeah. So what year was this?
This was, I think this was 2019 at the Arnold.
19. Okay. 1,003.
I have great memories of this because my wife competed at the Arnold figure amateur and she just got off stage and came and she was able to catch this bench.
That's nuts, man. Talk us through that. Like, what are you feeling when you lift off there?
I hope I nail my technique and nothing breaks because I might die.
Yeah. So keeping that line, I would imagine that is something you had to drill and drill and drill.
Yeah.
Like, especially with that type of what in the training cycle leading up to that, what did you hit in training?
937
was the biggest.
Yeah.
And that I'm sure kind of gave you the confidence. What was your opener?
937.
Was it?
Again,
so
it's
937, and then what was that? I'm assuming that was the third, right?
That was the second.
Second at 1,000. Did you try to go above that or left it?
Left it there.
That's awesome.
And 937 is an even number of reds too. So
Isn't that crazy, man? I love it. I love you. So you're big on that.
Yeah.
Big on that. It makes sense. It's, there's something about whether, it's those are 25 kilo plates, right?
Yep.
So it's a certain number of 45s. And it's kind of like, you have the guys with deadlift or squat that are plate quarter guys. It's just a plate and a quarter. Those are the jumps, right? Yep. Like you just go up, and especially as you get stronger, why are you messing with a 5 or a 10, right? Like if you're strong enough, it's just, that's what your jumps are, a plate and a quarter. So, going up, it's just, those things make sense to lifters, right? So I can appreciate that completely because, some change plates and not getting to that next 25 kilo plate, just it doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
It's just not the same weight,
Yeah.
So you pick out those numbers, and that's what the number is.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Did that develop over time?
For some reason, it was always like that. Like I remember first squatting with the bar and 45-pound plates that it was like 585, 675, 765. Like 765 seemed cooler than 770 or whatever, just the even number of plates. So I think it always carried over. And then in my powerlifting, it made my jumps and openers so easy because it may have not been the best strategic thing, but like all my warm-ups is just add a red until my last warm-up was a red, and then the next jump, my opener was an even number of reds.
Did you ever manipulate your numbers in the meet based on somebody else that was lifting with you?
Towards the end, fortunately, I never had to.
That's awesome. So you're just running your own race.
Yep.
And you're basically saying, hey, keep up with me if you want to, here's what I'm doing, and just go for it.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful spot to work from, man.
It is.
Like when you're the front runner and it's like, hey, this is what it is. I'm going. And if you want to try to keep up. So by the time you got to the deadlift, was that the one where you were trying to play with the numbers to get your total? Is that kind of how that worked for you? Or was there a certain focus on that as well?
Yeah. Mostly play with it to get the total that I wanted. Cause at that point, especially towards the end, it was like trying to hit my PR totals or set the record totals. So it was manipulating the deadlift to.
And what was the biggest deadlift you did?
816.
816. Love it, man. We should pull that up. And you did that love of the deadlift ever change? Or was it always kind of like I don't like this as much, let's squat and bench and I'll love those more, and then deadlift just kind of plays the third wheel?
Mentally, I knew why my deadlift lagged, and I tried to address it, and I tried to do different exercises that was like,
what was the reason it lagged?
I think just because I was fried by Fridays, and I just couldn't get an adrenaline rush to deadlift.
Interesting. Is it because you weren't under the bar?
Yep,
you think?
Exactly.
So with the bench, it's like if I don't lift this thing, it's crushing me. Squat, the same thing. Like I'm going down with it.
Yep.
But with deadlift, you're just picking it up.
Yep.
So at any point, there's no. There's not that there's not risk, but there's not a risk of you getting, crushed by it.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
That it's such an interesting thing, man, that you would go there in your head.
Yeah.
When you're lifting like that. So what year is this?
I think this was the 2016 Arnold. And my deadlift, it's probably the lift I feel like I never was able to display what I was capable of because I was very strong off the floor to the knees, but my grip and lockout was always very poor. So there's 816.
Nice.
Like I would try stuff in training where I'd loaded 915 a couple times and I could pull it to my knees and relatively easy.
Yeah.
But I couldn't lock out 800 or hold on to it.
Interesting. So was the do you think the limiting factor was the grip or the lockout strength?
A combination. And the other crutch I told myself was leverages. I got short arms and I had to pull the bar into my crotch to lock it out. But then you see guys with similar leverages and they can pull big weights. So I think it was just a mix of everything.
It's fascinating. I mean, talking through it, right? Like if Do you think if you would have loved the deadlift more that you would have maybe pushed it harder? Or is it like because you were so motivated by the squatting and the benching that like it just kind of came third? Because it's not like you wouldn't have had the power to do bigger weights than that, right? It doesn't make sense. Like, because you're handling these type of loads, so it's such an interesting thing though, because obviously you're not allowed straps. So that could be the limiting factor of the deadlift. It's just, looking at that, like, breaking it down and saying, hey, the lockout was this, or maybe the grip could have been this or whatever. Like, what do you think it was?
Yeah. I eventually went to hook grip, which helped.
Okay.
With deadlifting, I always loved to like grip it and rip it, which with the hook grip, you can't really do that. You got to engage
slow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, to this day, I've always wondered. And, so I really don't have a good answer.
Well, the setup, I mean, with a mixed grip, getting in that position can be tough.
Yeah. Right.
Like, and so when you go to a hook grip, it sets you up better potentially. And it's fascinating too, because like in strongman, some of my first contests, they actually didn't allow us straps. So you weren't allowed straps because they just, that was not a thing. So, you do a max deadlift and it was, most of the guys were at that point doing an over under, but I didn't have a problem holding onto the bar. I almost wish in some ways they would have kept it that way, because now the sport of strongman with the straps, like you've got guys, and then they came out with those figure 8 straps, which are nonsense. And it just kind of, it became kind of like this wild west of like, what can you get away with before you get called? And even now guys are they'll cheat the bar down into their fingertips, which completely manipulates the lift. You're changing the range of motion completely. Right. So I was, and you can argue one way or the other, but it was like trying to train for that. It was different. It was just different with a, mixed grip. And then it would bother me if I felt like I would kind of create a little bit of imbalance if I had my, over under. So I would always try to go both ways, because in my head, I wanted everything to be equal, so it's kind of like I would do some, and obviously like my left under felt better to me. But it was something that I would try to work on earlier. And then they kind of came in with the straps and we were allowed straps. So then you've got to get good at the straps. So I would do a double overhand build up in my warm-ups to whatever weight I couldn't hold on to anymore. And then I would add the straps in just to try to build the grip up. But it was such a fascinating thing, man, because it's like, as you emphasize it, and for a number of years for me, like my lockout on the deadlift was the issue. The power off the floor was not the issue. The lockout was. So, you can also in strongman hitch, right? So it's like you get in this bad spot where you're hitching. And, I forced myself to not hitch in training for several years. That was my thing, was like, I'm going to force myself to engage my glutes and drive my hips through to finish the lift without hitching. So that was just a discipline thing, because I could lift more with hitching for sure. But then I was like, if I practice this all the time, I'm going to get in this horrible habit, and I'm also not going to get stronger. Right. So it was a lot of really heavy lockout work. I actually really like bands for the deadlifting for the lockout work, because you had to engage really hard, and then it just got harder and harder as you went. So heavy band tension with like an elevated rack pull or block pull with heavy band tension. And that's what I just lived on. I just lived on those lifts for a couple of years, and then eventually it actually kind of flipped on me. So my lockout was stronger than off the floor. Right. So it was such a strange thing, but like the carryover for me with squatting, like and we were kind of talking before, like about a max squat, like what would be possible. And that's one thing that I never got tested in. Right. So squatting was never it was always for reps, which I really actually love squat. I liked it a lot. It was something though that we never got to do for maximum. So for me, I would go up, in training to certainly heavy weights, but I was a big fan of specialty bars. Yeah. So I started early on, and I had a really difficult time getting under a normal bar, because I wouldn't fit. And then if I did, it was my shoulders and my elbows just got so quick to get inflamed.
Yeah.
And I kind of realized early on, I was like, man, if I keep this up, like my shoulders are going to get so messed up. And then, then you come into well, why? Kind of like we were talking about with the power cleans, like why would you catch them or do a lift where if I'm never going to have to do it, or very rarely am I going to have to do it. And a lot of times we would do like a squat with an axle. So it was not the same at all as a normal bar. But I figured out that I could do the specialty bar squats, mainly like a safety squat bar, a spider bar, cambered bar, and I would rotate those really, really heavy. And then I would build up more strength for deadlifting with using those bars.
Yep.
And the translation over to events also was better. So it just made more sense. And then if I ever had to do an axle squat or like any type of squat variation, I could just plug it in for 6 weeks, and the strength would transfer over just fine. So it would just be more about finding the bar groove, and the pattern, the movement pattern, but the strength was already there.
Yep.
How much, with you squatting like that, how much did you use safety, like a safety squat bar, any type of specialty bar?
I pretty much evolved into the same thing you did. So for my specific competition training, I would just do singles, but because I carried a low bar, it trashed my elbows and shoulders. I would go to the specialty bars to do my volume rep work afterwards.
Interesting. So you would still touch a normal bar though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Pretty much weekly.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I bet that had to beat you up pretty good.
Yeah. It killed the elbows and shoulders.
So you almost had to recover from that. Did that affect your benching at all?
Yeah. I would get horrible bicep tendonitis from carrying the squat bar.
Interesting. Did you ever, like, when you were further away from a contest, did you ever not do a normal bar?
Nope.
Just rolled with it.
Yeah.
That's interesting, man. Like, looking back, did you ever have a spot where your shoulders and elbows, like, do you think if you would have given them a break, you would have lifted more, or no?
I don't think that I would have lifted more in competition. I think there's things that I could have done like that could have improved the longevity of my career.
Interesting.
But not the peak amplitude of it. I think, doing what I had to do to get that mind state every week, I had to do that to lift the weight that I did. And it may have not translated to the best longevity, but if I had approached it another way where I increased longevity, I know for a fact I would not have been able to hit the numbers that I did.
Interesting. So, I mean, and it's such an interesting thing. I'm sure over the last couple of years here, like you said, this period of adjustment, do you look back at your career, right? And I mean, would you change anything?
Absolutely not.
Not.
No.
Okay. And that's a beautiful thing to be able to say, man.
Yeah.
I mean, because you get out of it and then, you adjust and it's just a different mindset going to the gym, I'm sure now, right? Do you still love it?
I love it, but I can honestly say it doesn't get my juices going like it used to when I would know I'm going into squat 1,047 pounds.
Sure. And I'm sure that's got to be an adjustment too, right?
Big time.
Like, so how often do you go to the gym now?
5 days a week. I probably spend as many hours in the gym now as I ever did. It's just different.
It just doesn't light your fire the same way.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it completely makes sense, right? Because like as you get out of something, it's been, and I know for myself, like it's been an adjustment for me too, where knock on wood, I was lucky enough to be able to call my shot and walk away where I was still capable, very capable, and I wanted to be able to do that, right? Like I knew that there was and I had seen several guys go through it where they had some big injury and it was like, they are done.
Yep.
They're not coming back. And they weren't ready for it. So you definitely see that. I knew that was a risk for me, but also being able to say, hey, look, this is it. I'm done. I'm going to go into this. Like, this is what it's going to be. It's on the flip side of that, I think that I've had to analyze it and say, was it the right time? Right. Uh-huh. And I was comfortable for sure. And I'm happy. I'm still happy that I made that call. Like, I was in a good spot to do it, because I thought about it for a couple of years. Like, when is that time and when should it come and whatever. So that was a good thing. But also, you still go into the gym, and now I'm not dealing with the same thing that you're talking about, where it's like, hey, I have this, whether it's a disc issue or whatever that's limiting me, because I can still do all the lifts. Like, it's not that I can't, but now it's a different mindset, because I'm not necessarily, on some of the strongman events or whatever. Like, I'm not going to go in and I don't really have a desire to, because I'm not going to compete. So now I'm not pushing the numbers as much.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a fascinating thing when you go in the gym and you have to find a different way to approach it. I talked to Ed Cohen about this a little bit, and Ed was like, he said that he did different variations of lifts to make them more challenging, but also then he wouldn't have to compare it to any numbers he ever did.
Yeah.
Right.
Smart.
So it's like this crazy variation of whatever and make it even harder. So you can't lift as much weight no matter what, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. It's just like, hey, I'm going to go in and do this crazy variation a day, but I'm not then tapping into it's a normal lift that I'm comparing a number to.
Yep.
So it's still going in and having that hunger to train and get better, but it's not the same, right? Like, and in reality, will it ever be the same to you? As that type of weight, right? Like that guy that's on that screen with the chalk all over your face, and it's like this animal that's getting ready to lift. Like now, looking back, like when you look at that guy, what do you think?
I can't believe that. Like, now stepping away, it's a lot crazier to me. At the time, it felt like normal. Like, what I'm doing isn't crazy. It's normal.
Because you were living it, right?
Yeah. And now I look back and I'm like, that was kind of wild.
Sure. I mean, it's like, now that you're on the back side of it, like, do you have a different perspective of what it was or how it went?
I don't know if I have a different perspective of how it went. It feels like a different lifetime. It feels like a different lifetime, and just hard to describe.
Yes. It's crazy, man. It's such a and it's probably hard to even put into words, I would say. Right. Cause you go back and like, I know, for me, I can, like you said, like you're talking through those lists and it's like, well, I felt this crack when I did that. And I remember what that felt like. And, it's even that mindset though, like on a squat, to have that when you walk out and you're like, oh, something's wrong, I'm still going for it. Right.
Yeah.
Like people don't, the craziness of that, I think is wild to people, like how often when you were going to a meet, did you have something you were nursing? Like, were you tweaked? Did you have a lot of things tweaked?
I would say I stayed relatively healthy everywhere except for my back. Like muscle pulls, never had any of that.
Not too bad.
My hips always hurt, but the squat suit helped cover that. So I would really say I wasn't really nursing anything going into meets other than, and the back, it was more like a switch, not a dial, where it's like, it was never like, my back doesn't feel great. It was either like, okay, I feel fine until it's not fine.
How much recovery work did you do?
The stuff that you see and hear about, that I didn't really do a whole lot of that sexy stuff, like the foam rolling, the ice. I didn't hardly do anything like that.
Any soft tissue work?
Nope.
Nothing.
That's
wild, man. So when you went into training, how often did you have to call audibles? Meaning something didn't feel quite right. I mean, did you have to listen to your body a lot and take what it was giving you when you walked in the gym, or you fought through that too?
I fought through that probably a handful of times over 15 years or something
where it didn't feel quite right, or like let's just say you're going into bench and your elbow doesn't feel, or shoulder doesn't feel quite right, or you would just work through that.
Yep, just work through it.
That's wild, man. And it never resulted in like an injury where you were like, I should have backed that off a touch.
Yeah, no,
nothing.
Other than the cartilage stuff on some of the joints in the back.
Yeah.
I think I had a very healthy career.
To be honest, man, it sounds that way. Did you ever consider doing that stuff? Like did you do a lot of stretching, or were your warm-ups, like how did your warm-ups look before you lifted the bigger weights?
Zero stretching. Once I got hooked up with McGill, I would start doing like core and big three,
which is
stuff.
really good. That's really good stuff.
But after that, it's get under the bar, do the bar, 1 plate, 2 plate, 3 plate. I mean, that's about it.
And then just take your warm-ups. Like, I'm sure you felt your way through those, right? Like it was kind of like, hey, if, I know for me, it was like, if I needed to do an extra warm-up or two, I would always put that work into the warm-ups. And then once I was ready, then the weight would climb.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like, but I think you just kind of know, right? Like you know what your body's willing to give and where it's at. And, I think from your normal programming, that's, being able to push through. And then if something was bad enough, like I'm sure you had to back off if it was bad enough only, but there's also that voice of weakness that will creep in, right? And kind of always talk to you and say like, oh, this is more than you should do or whatever. Like you almost want to give yourself that out, And so I know for me that I always fought through that, right? But it was like, if there was something that was tweaked or didn't feel right, I knew it wasn't right. For me at least, I would say, all right, look, like it's not worth getting hurt. So I'm going to go in, maybe back it off, do the work that I can that feels okay, and then I'll go get it checked out or whatever. But I was definitely more on the. It sounds like compared to you, like I was more on. I really love the soft tissue work and a lot of stretching stuff, and I was really big on hot and cold. Did you ever do any of that?
Nope,
none of that either. That's crazy, man. Just lift and go.
Yeah,
and eat, right? So how was eating? Let's just touch on that real quick.
Man, I got more questions from people about my chicken shakes than anything lifting related, probably 10 times more. But so I never had the appetite to eat a lot and to consume enough calories to get as big and strong as I wanted.
So what was your top body weight?
400, right at 400.
Okay. That's crazy. What are you at right now?
315-ish.
Okay. So you've dropped. How do you feel dropping that weight?
Physically a lot better. Emotionally terrible.
Okay.
I feel like
I love the straightforward answers, man. Like I can 100% relate to that. Yeah. I feel physically better, emotionally not so much.
Yeah.
So 400 pounds.
Yep.
400 pounds. And that was around 2020. Was that about that time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So talk to us about the chicken shakes.
So I never had the appetite to eat much. I would try to make a meal plan and do the ground beef and rice, and I would eat 2 meals, and then I couldn't force myself to eat anymore. So eventually, Derek Poundstone was the first one I ever saw do it.
Yep.
So that 100% of my nutrition ended up being drinking chicken shakes because I couldn't force myself to eat, but I could force myself to open a shaker bottle and
drink.
Chug. And,
okay.
And that's,
so breakfast too. There's no breakfast?
Every single meal, 8 shakes a day, chicken shakes. That was it.
Strictly 100%.
Yep.
Okay. So what all was in it?
So chicken, water, spinach, mostly the spinach for the color.
Okay. Just to make it a little bit better color. Okay.
Yeah. And then I would have an okay time like eating carbs if I needed to, but I would normally blend rice either with the chicken shake or as separately.
Okay.
So all of my macros.
So the rice was blended separately sometimes.
Sometimes.
So you'd have a rice shake and a chicken shake.
Yeah.
That's fair.
But if I had time to prep everything perfectly, it was 8 shakes a day, and they were rice and chicken in each of them, and that was.
Anything else? No other fat or?
So I would do spinach or almonds or olive oil, and that's where I'd get my
put some
fats
oil
from.
in there. Interesting. Yeah. And you felt good on that.
Yeah, I mean, people thought it does sound crazy.
And you were able to gain weight.
Yeah.
That's wild because I mean, you think of like the calorie part of that. I mean, the rice would help for sure, but like from a like chicken isn't super calorie dense,
right?
So how much chicken was it in total?
I'm going to pull on my CTE again here, but it was 8,000 calories a day. Each shake was 1,000 calories. I don't remember the breakdown of protein, fat, carbs.
Sure.
But
you had calculated that out that it was 1,000 calories.
Yep.
And then you would do that every couple hours.
Yep.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry, I'm like fascinated by this. So you would just have like, hey, here's a chicken shake, and then I'm assuming you went out like in working or something, so you would just take them with you?
Yeah, I just load them in my cooler for the day wherever I'd be.
Okay. How is a chicken shake after 5 or 6 hours?
In the cooler.
After blending.
In the cooler, it's fine. Just got to make sure
did the consistency change with the rice in there?
Yeah.
Like, did it get thicker? I would imagine thicken up.
Yeah. The key is having the good blender. Like the Ninjas or the Walmart stuff doesn't cut it. You got to get it
blended right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And that, so it wouldn't, now would you, I would assume the consistency needed to be where you could still drink it though.
Yep.
Right. So what was the volume of each one?
It was the big shaker bottles. So bigger than that size. I don't know how many ounces it was, but that would be about full, and 8 of those a day. And
how long would it take you to put it down?
10 seconds.
So just slam it.
Yeah. And that was the problem with eating, because like at work, you're busy or you're driving or you're out in the field, and like I didn't have the appetite to begin with. When I did have the appetite, it would take me 45 minutes to sit there and miserably chew through a meal. You know, that takes up a lot of time in the day. That shake is 10 seconds and I'm done. Yep.
Well, I mean, it definitely does, man. At one point for me, and I'd never really 100% did it, but the time in the day to chew and swallow food, just to simply sit there and chew and swallow food when you're eating that amount of calories is, I mean, if you were to add it up, it would be probably 3 hours.
Yeah.
Maybe more. It depends. And again, like I was definitely in the mindset where my phone, if I was going to eat, this wouldn't work. Like I couldn't be talking. So it was like my job at that moment was to eat, right? So we're not having a conversation. It's not casual. Like I'm focused on this. And if I was weird with it, but it was like, if I had to eat, that was what I was going to do. So, you know, and depending on at certain points when I was actively like trying to gain weight, if I was full, then I had to go to a different spot to focus on this. So then it was like I was going to lift, that type of mindset. So I would at times get up, I would pace back and forth, look at the food, get pissed off at the food, then sit down and be like, you're getting eaten now. You know what I'm saying? Like, but people don't understand when you go and it's like, I'm sure if somebody would have saw that, it would have been interesting for sure. It was, one time different funny story about that. We were in New York. We had just done a contest, and Mark Philippi, I'm sure you know Mark or have met him at some point or something, but we had ordered this like massive sandwich, right? Like huge. And it's, you know, like however tall, right? And I was like, okay, I'm going to eat half of this because there's probably 4 pounds of meat on it or whatever. It was like wild. And so Mark strategically is sitting there and he's watching me eat the sandwich. And I finished half of the sandwich. And then Mark, and I'm pretty full, right? Like I was like, kind of like, all right, dude, like that was great. I'm going to package this up. I'm going to take it. And Mark is like, waits for that moment. He's like, Brian, I bet you that you can't eat the other half of that sandwich, right? And it was like one of these things where I was pretty new as well, right? Like, cause it was just like the end of Mark's career. And I was just like a rookie coming in, whatever. And I was like, man, this dude just challenged me to eat this sandwich, and I'm not backing down from this challenge. There's no way, right? So I pulled that in the restaurant. I stood up, started pacing back and forth, because you know when you go in to eat something, you have to be in the right mindset to eat it, right? And if I would have known that this was an eating challenge, I would have attacked it, because, you know, at a certain point you start to get full, and like you only have a period of so long before you're like, it doesn't work. And I sat down, man, and I ate that thing. And it was, I definitely went back to my hotel room and threw up, because it was like, but I was not going to fail. And I don't know if I've even told Mark that to this day. Like, I was not going to give up on that at all. Like it was bad, man. I was shoving it, just like getting it done. But you just the eating, like the challenge of eating that much food for a lifter. People don't understand what type of commitment that is.
It's so miserable.
You found the outlet, man. The chicken shake was your. And how long did you roll with that?
10 years
of straight chicken shakes.
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever go and say, "Hey, I'm going to take my wife out and have a good dinner or something"?
Maybe once a month we'd have like a normal meal. But
okay.
She preps too, so she did her.
So she was on board.
Yeah.
Okay. Did she like chicken shakes?
She probably chugged them better than I do. Like I had to still, like, mentally, I had to get ready to
focus.
Yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't like you were enjoying it. It was not for enjoyment at all.
Absolutely not.
It was just functionality of, let's get it down. Here you go.
Yep.
That's good. Did you ever experiment with anything else going into the chicken shake?
Oh, I tried a lot of stuff. I tried like salmon, other fish. I tried beef. None of it works because the salmon, the oil, once you let it sit, fat, it settles out, and the beef is horrible. You can have the leanest beef that you possibly can, but when you blend it, the fat still like splatter out and stick to the blender. Like chicken is the only meat that, and I tried turkey, which was okay, but the color and smell of the turkey was even worse than the chicken.
Too much.
Chicken is the meat to blend if you're going
So
to.
I did for a while when I couldn't afford anything at all. I did tuna shakes. So it was tuna and orange juice mixed together. And that was what I did, because I could get the cans of tuna for, what was it at that point? Like, I think it was like 59 cents. I could get a whole can of tuna. And so I would typically do like 2 cans of tuna and orange juice, and blend that up and go for it. You don't, that doesn't sound good?
No, I mean, it might be a good idea. I never tried the orange juice would help. Maybe
the citrus. The citrus took off. Now, you didn't want to smell it.
Yeah.
That's not a smell, like it's not a comfortable, like, hey, let's whiff this real quick. It was like, again, I'm taking a big breath now. I'm not breathing until this is gone, like one of those.
Yeah.
But it was what, honestly, man, it was what I could afford. Back then it was like, that I could go in and get however many cans of tuna. And that was it was basically the cheapest protein that I could get, because I couldn't get chicken that cheap. And then any type of red meat, of course, would be more expensive. Yep. So it was, it filled that void at least, So I would do, those and pasta, a lot of that. I would make like a big container. I typically had like a huge Tupperware thing, and I would take a cooler with me, and it was a lot of pasta. And then I would throw in, sometimes that was tuna as well, tuna and pasta and whatever. And then if I could have red meat, that would be the best on that. But, it's the crazy things you do, like to get through it, but it sounds like at that point, it was simply a time savings, and you could control what you were eating.
Exactly.
Did you ever try any type of like sauce mixed in for flavor?
I think the closest I tried is I tried doing like a nice seasoned chicken breast grilled.
Yep.
And that was horrible because like the seasoning. I never thought about trying a sauce, but
like a mix in a little bit of barbecue or something.
Yeah, like as plain of cooking chicken as possible.
Salt?
No
salt. I mean, I'm fascinated, man. That's good. That's really good. So, but you figured it out, 1,000 calories a shake, and then you were eating 8,000. So that was your top. Was that the top amount of calories you ever ate? Was it like around 8,000 a day?
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And you consistently gained weight with that.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? Huh? Like I would think at close to that you might, well, I guess it depends, right? Like on your, were you doing a lot of was it pretty much strictly just the training that you were doing? And then like, was work for you much energy expenditure or not too much?
Yeah. Work is like no calorie.
So you weren't burning anything there.
No.
So not active on your feet or anything. So you got to just drink the shakes and train, and that's it.
Exactly.
Well, see, that's good, man. I mean, it's such a fascinating thing. Like when you get into it, would you? And I'm assuming you would do that same thing now, like competition wise. That would be the way you'd want to go. Or would you add in? Do you think if you would have added in more red meat, it would have helped?
I think so. And in the last few years, I've changed a lot and learned a lot with different goals now. And red meat is all I eat now for protein. But
interesting.
I don't know if I can't blend it. I've learned that. So I still don't know if I could consume enough calories of red meat and whatever else to consume the amount of food I needed to get that big. So
yeah, I had a buddy of mine that was he was doing liver shakes. So he would, but the same thing with like the orange juice, right? So it was frozen liver, and he would blend that up. And he claimed and it was raw too, raw frozen liver. Yep. And then he would do orange juice. And I was like, man, that's different, but he claimed like the nutrient, density of that, which a lot of people are on the organ meats and like that type of thing. So I don't know. But the chick, that's the only thing I would say is like, from my standpoint is like, because I'm huge on like bison. I love bison. I always have through my career. That was like my number one thing that I would eat. And that would be a tough one to blend. But, it's again, time versus like just getting calories in. And, if you look at your body as an engine, you're just fuel. It's fuel that you're putting into the engine, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, if you're feeling good and your numbers were going up and you're recovering, I mean, I don't know that you really need to change it that much.
Yeah.
You know,
that's the perfect analogy.
Yep. I mean, I think a lot of lifters out there too. Now, you said you pretty much followed the same program, like for you.
Yep.
And were you your own coach?
Yep.
So you always just rolled with what you were doing.
Uh-huh.
It's such a fascinating thing, man. Cause for me, I was very much the same way, right? Like I was, I mean, not that I wouldn't talk to other guys about different things they were doing and maybe try to come up with different ideas. But again, it all came down to what I was going to do until later in my career. And I just got so busy with business and stuff. And so I brought in Joe Ken to help me out a little bit with like some of the stuff. Cause I was like, hey man, just send me the program. Cause I'm mentally like, I can't put as much time into thinking about it. And so that was only my last couple of years of competing. But for the most part, I really liked being able to be my own coach. Mm-hmm. Do you think there was a lot of value in that for you?
I do, for sure. I think no one's going to care as much about your training as yourself. Even the best coach, they might get close, but no one's going to care as much about that as you. And then just the engineer part of my brain, I just loved tinkering with rotations or exercises, reps, volume, intensity, using a spreadsheet for everything. I loved that part of it.
Yeah, it's how much accessory equipment did you use?
A lot more than most powerlifters. I did a ton of volume and accessory work.
Was it more free weight accessory stuff, or was it a lot of cable work, or was it machines?
Early on, it was mostly free weights because of my availability to equipment. Towards the end of my career, adding more pieces to my gym was more cable and machine stuff. I think there's a lot of value in that stuff. It just takes up a lot of room and costs money. It does.
Do you have favorite pieces of equipment?
Yeah. Outside of a power rack and the barbell and weights, hands down, it's a functional trainer that the arms can go up and down and side to side.
Yep.
I have yet to find a muscle group, upper or lower, or exercise that I cannot create very effectively on that.
So did you use that? Did you use that a lot when you were powerlifting more? Or is that more now?
I used it a lot the last few years of my powerlifting career.
Okay,
but a ton now.
See, it's interesting, man. I mean, it's like you got to have kind of like the meat and potatoes, right? Like the basic stuff. Like you can get a lot done with a rack and a bar.
Yeah,
and I think sometimes people, I don't want to say they forget that, but it's sometimes not as exciting, right? It's like, oh, I want to have this or that. And, I know for me, I always wanted to keep my training very interesting. And this is just, so I wanted to have different attachments, for example, for, row variations or pull downs or, different pieces of equipment that I could throw in that were strategic, but also would keep it really fresh for me. So every time I was going in the gym, I would, like I was talking about the squatting, like I would rotate the bars I was using weekly. Like it was never the same, or some type of accommodating resistance or whatever. So it was always something new.
Yep.
And it was, for me, very mentally stimulating, right? Because I could go in and train and it was fun. And it wasn't like, oh man, here's my program again. I have to do the same thing again and again and again. And so that, I think, for me was part of why I liked being my own coach, was because I didn't ever feel like, hey, there's somebody that gave me a program and now I'm going to go off script and do my own thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, I know that this is going to work, or, I can break this movement down, or whatever it might be, this event down. And I know I can get better if I do these things. So it just made sense.
Yeah.
So I think there's some beauty in that. But again, I think what you just said, right? Like is I think a lot of coaches out there now, you would hope they care about it for sure, but it's definitely blown up into a big thing where people are trying to coach, and sometimes people are trying to coach that aren't really qualified to coach, right? And then everybody, I think as a lifter, a lot of times now it's almost expected that you have a coach, which is kind of a strange concept to me.
Very much.
Right? Like why do you have a coach? Or are you at a point where you've tried everything on your own, or, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, that is weird too, because like when I first started in the sport, like an online coach wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
So it's definitely evolved. And another reason I liked coaching myself is that I was fully responsible for the success or failure of my performance. So, if you don't have anyone to blame but yourself if things don't go to plan. But
it's an interesting one, man. It's a different like thought process, like shifting, and you got to kind of see that with the like geared powerlifting versus the raw stuff, and like how that kind of shifted. And now I know there's this whole thing that the geared powerlifting almost gets hated on. It's like, oh, well, you're doing this, but it's a different, like when you're going into a competition and people are all allowed to wear the same thing, and you're just putting up bigger numbers. That's what it is, right? Like, and it's yes, there's a skill in learning how to do it, but it's also a level playing field. Yeah. So it's kind of fun there too. So it's an interesting one, man. Interesting one. Yeah. So what are your goals now?
Man, my life has just felt crazy and different and wild since 2020. That fractured the spine, chased that around. Okay, solved it. Thought I was coming back. So now I would say, it's kind of a cliche word, but I guess longevity.
Yeah.
Like Peter Attia, I've started getting into a bunch of his stuff. So I'm trying to retain as much muscle and strength as I can. That's still my number one goal.
Sure.
But I've started walks and dialed my nutrition in even more. Like all the Peter Attia stuff. Working with Merrick Health for like blood work, optimizing everything about my blood work.
Yeah.
So that's my goal now.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. It's like this full circle thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, and getting to speak to you kind of on the back end of, all of the big lifts and the crazy like intensity and, whatever, then you kind of shift. It's almost like a new chapter, right?
Yep.
Like you turn the page and it's like, all right, cool. We're going to write this next chapter, which is cool, man.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I'm sure it's a little bit different attack, a little bit different mentality, but still a lot of good things can come from it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I love it.
It's very much different.
I love it, man. Well, thank you for coming on. Where can people find you if they want to follow your stuff? Are you doing a lot of stuff online, or is it?
No. When I was lifting, I did almost everything I did. I posted on my Instagram, and I hardly post there anymore. But when I do, that's normally where it's at.
That's awesome, man. Well, Blaine, I appreciate you coming on, man. And I'm sure there's some people that are going to find this really fascinating, just kind of the different lifts and seeing some of the crazy feats of human strength, like it's a fun thing to like look back on, I'm sure, for you, and your story's awesome, dude. So thank you for coming on. Definitely appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Ryan. It's been fun watching your whole story and career too. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast episode and would like to listen to another, click right here. And to stay informed about new podcast episodes, click here to subscribe.